Hello, Spiceheads. It's Emily with SpiceWorks. Thanks for tuning in today and joining us on another SpiceWorks Partner Webinar. It's your SIM tool covering your assets, brought to you by AccelOps. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone this webinar is being recorded. If you have to step away for any reason, you will get an email with a link to the video in about a week. Also, there's a Q&A box on your screen to the left, and I encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to those questions at the end via verbal Q&A, but if your question isn't addressed live, someone will be able to follow up with you. As usual, we also have a live chat, so join in by clicking the brown widget at the bottom of your screen. Now let's get started. Our presenter today is Mike Reinhardt, Director of Product Marketing. Mike has a bachelor's from University of San Francisco in Information Systems Management and brings 30-plus years of experience to the table. Mike's career has heavily focused on security and compliance. So, Mike, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Great, thank you. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your day today. I think this is a relevant subject to most folks that are having to deal with the security issues that seem to be plaguing most organizations these days. I'm going to focus in on one particular area today in this webinar. We typically talk about some of the breaches that have happened across the industry, but today we're going to focus on the Internet of Things and how the SIM tool can help you in managing some of those things. And why I bring this up is because there was a recent study that Black Hat did where they asked IT professionals what do they believe will be the greatest concern for them in 2 years from now. So looking into the future 2 years from this was late last year. The number one thing they said that was concerning them is the Internet of Things, which is kind of why I'm going to be focusing on that today. But also to add additional, credibility or credence to that, that same group was asked if the Internet of Things is the thing that scares you the most, how many of you are prepared or ready to deal with that? And frankly, 73% were not ready. They either didn't have the staff that they have wasn't trained properly, and they're concerned about that. So this is good news if you're a managed service provider. These are capabilities you can bring to a business that doesn't have those skill sets today. But there's also other ways we can use to make this problem a little easier to manage going forward. So I'm going to start with defining what is the Internet of Things. It typically has a bad connotation in a lot of ways, but it's really just physical objects or devices that have electronics embedded into them that are able to connect to a network, and they're able to exchange and collect data for the end user. It also allows objects to be sensed and controlled remotely, and then results in better efficiencies, accuracies, and there's some economic benefits, and we'll explore a few of those through this deck. Gartner also says that it's a very immature domain. Product technology categories aren't really clearly established. It's going to be a cornerstone of a lot of digital business strategies in the future, and it's going to be mainstream adoption starting next year, beginning this year, starting into next year. But with that, it brings some challenges to the world, and it has 3 stages according to Andrew Rose from Wired.com. Stage 1 is that the objects, the Internet of Things, get identities. So the ability to have an IP address, the way to get into the device is very stable and standard. As these things change, it's now able to sense its surroundings. So things like the Nest would be a good example of that, where it can detect doors opening and closing and alarm systems. And then stage 3, the devices actually start interacting with each other. They have the ability to talk to each other, share information with each other, and are aware of each other. So we'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly as it relates to the Internet of Things, and then tie that into SIM tools and how those can help you and or not if you have the right ones. So focusing on the good, there's a lot of examples that are currently out there in the market today. This is just a small sampling. We're going to focus on 3 of these, coffee makers, automobiles, and smart TVs. I just happened to have purchased a smart TV recently, and so I've got an interesting story that kind of perplexed me when I turned the television on and grabbed the guide to read what I could do and can't do with that TV. The first example is something that's called the Internet of Cows. You can actually look this up on the internet. It is a real thing. It's something that was developed by the Japanese. It's essentially a Fitbit for cattle. They can put a little bracelet on them. They can track them throughout the field, but it also gives them the indication of when a cow might be ready for breeding. And this is important to them because they're able to then get them in front of a bull quickly, which is a big problem, which I never knew people had. But and then the other part of it is, depending on the time of their cycle, they can predict if it's going to be a female or a male cow. So that's important to this industry. It helps them. It's a very interesting tool, Internet of Things. It's tied to the barn when they come in. They've got antennas that are downloading information, so quite unique. We're also seeing insurance agencies using the Internet of Things with sensors that you can purchase for your car, which also has an app that's tied to your iPhone. So for example, if you're parked at a parking lot in a shopping center, you're in the store shopping, somebody bumps your car with a sensor, it's going to indicate that on your phone. It's going to send you an alert and an alarm. It's also going to connect you with the agent from your insurance company, so they can quickly file a claim. They can get that process going quickly. They know what happened because of the sensor being the indicator of a collision or some sort of bump. This is currently being used in the UK pretty extensively and starting to make progress into the US as well. And if any of you travel to Orlando, which in my line of work happens quite frequently, you may be aware of the Walt Disney World's Magic Band. It's essentially kind of a Fitbit-like device that you wear on your wrist. It gives you access to the park. It helps you pay for things. It also helps the staff to understand where the congregation of crowds are, and do they need to add additional resources, people, open up additional road openings to allow more traffic through. They're able to track all the users and the customers within their rides and the park while they're there. It also gives you kind of a retroactive GPS view of where you travel through the park. So again, these are really good applications of the Internet of Things and capabilities that they're bringing to organizations. Many of them are looking for these to add additional productivity from their current infrastructures and people. And then now we're going to talk a little bit about the bad and why this is perplexing and concerning, kind of tying it back to the Black Hat survey. Current predictions are that by the year 2020, there will be almost 50 billion objects on the network. So after about 2008, there was more connected devices than there were people. By 2020, there will be roughly 6.5 devices per person on the planet. That includes newborns all the way up to mature adults. So a lot of things that are going to be impacting networks that weren't necessarily designed to deal with that kind of traffic, and also providing other areas and ways for people with bad intentions to get into networks. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. HP did a report back in 2014 that said 70% of the most commonly used Internet of Things devices contain vulnerabilities. A lot of them were developed as a productivity tool, a productivity gain, capabilities that weren't out there, but because of that, the focus was on the utility of the device or the object as opposed to the security of that. And part of that is because there's no common standards currently. So things like smart door lock, like we talked about before, people could potentially use that device, the Internet of Things device, to hack into the network to figure out when does the security guard come by each time, so I can use that to potentially break into the building. It also provides a high potential for blind spots from IT professionals, things that are coming onto the network, road devices that you aren't aware of coming into the network, nor can you manage that because you don't know about it. And some things might be, out there for a number of years with that vulnerability. They may not have been hacked in the short term, but it gives the longer they're out there without that security baked into it, the longer you're going to have with that potential risk to your network. Now going to the ugly. So this is an interesting concept where we've had coffee pots where you've got the ability to use your app to turn the coffee pot on, the number of cups you want, the strength of the coffee. And that's kind of an interesting thing to have and a neat kind of thing to have. It's something that's going to be brought into an office very unassumingly. The IT team is obviously not technically going to be aware of that, but it is connecting to the Wi-Fi device. One of the vulnerabilities they found is they can easily kick that device off of the network, and then also with 2 commands through your iPhone, they're able to get the unencrypted wireless key right to their phones very simply and easily. Another example is, you may have seen this on the news even, Jeep, through its Uconnect entertainment system, a hacker was able to get, this was a controlled study, but they were able to get through the entertainment system into the Jeep's infrastructure. They were able to kind of do some kind of pranky things with turning the heater on and off, the radio station's volume up or down, and the windshield wipers on and off. But the scary thing about that is that they were also able to disable the brakes in the car and kill the engine. And where this becomes a potential threat or a potential problem, obviously, people on the road getting in accidents, but they're also thinking that potentially this could be a way for terrorist activity to use cars now as in essence, a suicide bomber. So obviously a very scary and bad use of Internet of Things without security baked into it. And this story is a personal one. I actually just purchased a smart TV. I'm not sure if you folks are aware of that, but it has baked-in channels like, Roku, Netflix, Amazon. It's a great little device without having a bunch of things you got to plug into it. But when I started reading the manual, I also had the ability to turn the TV on and off through voice commands, and also change channels, that sort of thing. But if you look in the guide, and this is not an uncommon thing, it says that the voice commands may be transmitted along with information about your device, including the device identifiers, to a third party. So Samsung happens to be using Nuance, which is a voice recognition company today. It's a third-party provider, so I don't know if Nuance has gone through any kind of security planning or security checks. The other scary thing is that the TV, even when it's off, because it's waiting you to tell it to turn on, is listening into your room, waiting for you to give it a command. So all that information is being transmitted to this third party. Again, don't know if it's secure or not. They didn't even put any sort of caveats or little identifiers as to get more information about it here. So that kind of made me a little mad. The next one is an event that happened in the UK this year, but it kind of reminded me of another event that, or a test that had been done previously, where they were able to get into the power grid by hacking into the generator, essentially turning the generator's cooling system off, causing the generator to essentially heat up, freeze, caught on fire, damage the generator obviously, but also turn down the power grid. And the power grid is a big area of concern. Energy in general is a big area of concern for hacking. So there are a number of ways into these organizations through Internet of Things types of devices. Things that you would think are benign potentially could have catastrophic impacts to a business as well as a city or a state, especially if it's attacking the power grid. So Gartner says that breaches and attacks are inevitable, and a recent study by Ponemon kind of confirmed that. They asked a number of IT professionals, hundreds of IT professionals, if they had experienced a material breach in their network or their systems. 47%, nearly half of them said that they had. These are people that knew about it. The other statistic, and this kind of varies in a number of days, but 256 days as of last year was the average time to know that you've actually been attacked or detecting that you've been attacked. And it's less than the previous year, which is good news. But the other stat that's kind of interesting is that 81% of those breaches are discovered by a third party, not by the organization themselves. It's usually through a credit card that's been compromised. The consumer understands that their credit card company calls them and says, hey, you're over your limit, or we see your weird activity. They're able to trace it back to the business where that originated from. Target gets a lot of play on that. That's another breach that occurred through an air conditioning company that they used as a third-party vendor. Was able to get a phishing email into the system and then hack into the PCI payment card devices within the organization. And then another study that was done by ESG for ServiceNow, which is one of our partners, they asked the IT industry what they think is the most important thing that SIMs need to have for incident response excellence. The number one answer was the ability to bridge security and IT tools together. Traditional ways of managing these device hacks or threats to the network is that the NOC people will bring their analytical data into a room. The SOC people will do the same. They try to manually cross-correlate that data. This is typically after a breach has occurred as opposed to identifying it ahead of time. And it is a big flaw in the way IT organizations are managing it today, in that they've got numbers of silos of organizations with different skill sets from their people, different tools that are being used to manage and monitor the network, and none of those talk together or provide a seamless way of looking at the potential threats to an organization. So we're going to go back to Gartner again. They've defined a magic quadrant around SIM. We're a player in that space as well. And the basic requirements are the ones that you're seeing here. They have to have analytics. It's got to have the ability to get log analysis, behavior profiling, so incidents that are happening on the network like brute force logins or changes to an infrastructure need to be understood. Data and specific user monitoring, deployment, support and simplicity, log management, real-time monitoring, and threat intelligence. All those are like the basics that you have to have. And of course we've got those, but there's some additional capabilities that we bring and that we also think is unique to the network or to the networking world and important to businesses that are trying to deal with these threats that the Internet of Things are kind of imposing on these businesses. Because the more devices you're having to manage, the more threats that you're going to be experiencing because of these Internet of Things growing in popularity and in quantity. We believe that these capabilities of self-learning asset inventory database, we'll go into a little bit about that, the ability to cross-correlate that data from the NOC and SOC, and also having a single pane of glass view, meaning one screen to look at that gives you all the reporting data about the threats in your network, devices that are attaching to your network, rogue devices roaming from one Wi-Fi device to another. It's also going to have the ability to scale elegantly and seamlessly. For managed service providers or large organizations, multitenancy is a big key. And then the ability to be very flexible and adding different capabilities to the network. So the self-learning, always accurate asset database, that's really critical to understand what is in your network today. What does your baseline network topology look like? What are all the elements in it? What are all the devices that are connected to it? The applications that are running on it, the individual users, what are the interrelationships? And why that's important is, again, with the Internet of Things, you've got devices that are potentially attaching to your network in a rogue manner, things that you need to understand against what was your baseline, what's changed over time. In real time, being able to understand when something's added to the network, what elements it's touching, what potential applications are running on a device that it's potentially attaching to, which work groups are going to be impacted. So very important to understand what does your physical infrastructure look like and keep a constant tab on that. And that's one of the first things that the AccelOps tool does, is really looks at all the broad elements connected to your network, provides you baselines, and then reports associated with any changes to that, including who logged into a device. Did they have the right credentials? Was it an IP address that you recognized, or one that's from a country that you don't normally do business with? Did they make any changes to the configuration? What were those changes that were made? Do you have the ability to roll back to the old configuration? All those are key in watching over your network and doing your due diligence to manage against these types of threats. And again, the ability to correlate data from the SOC world, which is logs from your firewalls, your servers, your routers, et cetera, with things like what is my CPU utilization and what is my memory utilization, up and down time, performance indicators, and kind of bridging that gap between current departments. Today they're doing that separately. A small thing like a phishing attack could be coming into your network, and it's going to cause a little potential blip on your CPU utilization in a particular environment. So before that becomes a big problem, you're able to identify these things when they're small and deal with those and reroute those out of your network. The single pane of glass view is really the best way to get a rapid remediation of threats to your network. Having reports that are giving you triggers and alerts and alarms to the thresholds you set up and the SLAs that you set up. Having a single place for all of your IT staff to look at to get the reports they need to better manage the potential for these threats. It really reduces the time. It's much more productive, less personnel required to manage that, and a much better way of reporting your quality of service. The cloud scale architecture is critical as well. We've got a number of customers who have come to us because they've had a hardware-based SIEM solution that may have fit their needs for a period of time, but as they've grown in size, business is good. They're adding multiple nodes. And again, the Internet of Things becoming a part of networks, you're going to have a lot more devices to manage. So you need the ability to scale along with that growth into the network. Multitenancy, that's the ability for you to look at the network in total, but also to carve out parts of that. So we talked about the CMDB before, having the ability to pull in elements from that topology map into a specific reporting domain. So you may have, for example, we've got some higher education customers today that have a student store where they're taking payment card information. So they've got PCI compliance concerns there. There's specific devices that are germane to that environment. They want to report on that separately. They want to have audit trails that they can go back to an auditor with paperwork that shows how they've managed the network over time. You don't want to look at the entire network necessarily just to focus in on that one environment. But they've also got teaching hospitals. So now you've got HIPAA requirements to maintain. And again, specific devices germane to that teaching hospitals network infrastructure. You want to build reporting tools associated just with that environment. But it also gives you the ability to look at the overall environment in total. Again, so as a business, this is a key element, but if you're a managed service provider, this is crucial in kind of helping your customers with better reporting tools, the ability to look at them separately, but also provide tiered access into the reports that are available today. The rapid and flexible integration. So one of the things that we do well is we are able to ingest a lot of data from multiple different devices. For example, Palo Alto Networks, Cisco, are hardware vendors where they're constantly changing their product lines. There's also threat feed data that we can ingest into our system as well. You want something that's going to be able to be flexible and adopts things very quickly and easily as your needs change. And so this is really kind of an overview of what AccelOps does best. We take the best of SIEM, but we also add real-time and self-learning CMDB, so we're constantly looking at the network, what's changing, what devices are coming on, which devices are coming off, which devices are roaming through the organization. giving you the ability to see any impacts on specific services or devices, understanding what the connectivity is, the interrelationships are, and if you have to pull a device out of the network, who's going to be impacted, what departments are going to be impacted, what services are going to be impacted, giving you a lot of information to make those decisions. Again, we're also bashing NOC data along with SOC data into our analytics engine, trying to figure out what it is that is causing a potential problem or a threat to the network, and trying to catch that early on, not having to do this post-breach, but a much better view into the network pre-breach. The single pane of glass, again, gives you a tool that you can use for looking at an overall network, individual components of the network, specific compliance domains, but it also gives you tiered access so that you can have an Uber reports receiver all the way down to an executive who just wants a high-level view of the network and all the activity and capabilities that are going on in there. And then multi-tenancy, again, is really key to large organizations to break up their environments to smaller reporting domains, but also for managed service providers. We also bake in pre-built reports for the most common compliance needs. PCI and HIPAA probably be the top two. But if you're in the utilities world, then you've got things like NERC, which is the infrastructure for our power. But we've also got capabilities for if you're doing business in Europe with the GPG 13s. ISO is a big capability in that area. And SANS, critical controls, all baked in as part of your out-of-the-box solution from AccelOps. So our assertion is that you may have a SIM, but it's got some gaps if you don't have some of the capabilities that we're bringing to the market. And if that is not baked into your solution, you may be going from this type of suit to potentially this type of suit, where you may have angry customers, third-party vendors, opening up your company to exposure for lawsuits. And in many cases, we're seeing CEOs that are being let go, CIOs that are being let go because of breaches to their networks. We're trying to give you the tools that you can use to better identify these threats and make it easy. So I talked about customers that are growing. Stables is one of them. This is one that we just recently added. Their quote is pretty self-explanatory. Our CMDB tool alone was a big selling factor for them, but they were also growing like crazy. Stables is a really high-profile number 2 e-tailer on the web, kind of tag teams between Alibaba and them. But they've got a presence throughout the world. They're also expanding and growing through acquisition. So it's a very dynamic organization, had a lot of unique needs, but we were able to take one of our competitors out there that wasn't as able to move and be as flexible as we were. We also had PCI compliance, which was key to them. We're doing this in all of their stores today. It was being deployed worldwide, so we've got over 2,000 stores on the network today in 28 different countries. We're looking at 30,000 different payment devices currently being managed on the solution. They are, again, in M&A talks and trying to get that organization to grow. We'll be able to grow right along with them with our tool because it's very scalable. We've made it easy out of the box. The reports were simple for them to use. It makes it easy for them to deal with this compliance capabilities and management. I should also mention that we, ahead of RSA this year, launched a cloud version of our solution. So we're a virtual appliance today, but we also have the same capabilities through the Amazon Web Service. And we try to make it easy for organizations to manage their security and compliance needs. So I've kind of run through that pretty quick. So lots of times for questions. I'll open it up to the group for any folks that have any particular questions. I'm looking at one now that's asking, how does AccelOps compare to Carbon Black? Actually, Carbon Black is a company that we have a technology relationship with. We are able to ingest the data that they're collecting into our tool. Again, that's one of the benefits of this single pane of glass platform is that we can bring in threat feed data from a number of different sources, Carbon Black being one of them, Red Seal is another one, but lots of different ways to slice and dice the data and different sources of the data. Again, we're trying to make it easy by consolidating all that through a single analytics tool. So we actually like Carbon Black. We play well with them, and a number of other vendors in that same kind of space. And I get a question about what's the biggest competitive advantage. Again, the self-learning CMDB, the ability to look at all the devices on the network, collect that data day one, really presenting the customers what they view of their network, and in many cases, we're finding devices attached to their network that they didn't know they had. We had a recent customer that had gone through a merger and acquisition. They used our product in a proof of concept. We plugged our tool into the network and discovered a team in Australia that was still connected to their network through a port in one of the routers that they had no idea was there. We also had another company where one of the IT professionals was using their data center to run a side business, and we were able to see all the devices that he was using for that particular business. So key capabilities there. Again, the out-of-the-box reports that we offer for compliance management is key. A lot of our competitors require professional services to customize the reports for them. We've got most of the use cases already baked into our solution, but we do have the ability to easily customize it depending on your specific needs. But that, and then I guess the ability to cross-correlate data between NOC and SOC. Again, we're one of the few that have a single platform for collecting data about performance on the network, both CPU, as I mentioned, memory utilization, the performance of the devices, then correlating that with security log data through firewalls and routers and switches. Being able to do that through a single pane of glass is, again, a very unique capability in the marketplace today. And I'm getting a question, is that AI driven? So we have the ability to take both historical data as well as real-time information. So the analytics we're collecting and reporting on are happening in real time, but we also have the ability to collect that data, store it, report on it. You can extract reports in CSV files, Excel files. But yeah, so it can be done historically and or in real time. Our tool is doing everything in real time and then collecting that into a server for storage for later. Another question, is the government asking for this type of data when looking for break-ins? I'm not exactly sure the question, but I'll try to take a swag at it. I mean, we actually have governmental agencies using our product today, a number of states and local governments, but we've also got some federal government folks looking at it and using it. I'm just going to leave it there. I don't know specifically what you might be asking for. Unless it's related to the thing like Apple and the break-ins, the ability to unencrypt data, but I'll leave that alone. So we do have a cloud-based solution or an in-house solution. Somebody was asking about that question. In the cloud scenario, we're providing the infrastructure on AWS. So it's all of our servers, routers, switches, supervisors, workers. We'll put a collector on site, but everything else is all Amazon Web Services based. But you can also purchase our licenses and put them on your own servers if you want to have a private environment. That's certainly the most embedded base of our customers today are consuming the product that way. But you have the option of either one or both, and we've got some doing both that. How secure are Cal Fitbits? I love that. They are probably not. I mean, again, this is one of those Internet of Things devices that was developed to fulfill a specific use case, but security was an afterthought or not even thought about. And again, that's the caution that HP had in their survey, is that these devices are being consumed, they're being deployed. Organizations don't think about the security impacts. And the longer that they're out there in the market and in use, the longer hackers have to figure out a way to get into those things. So I'm not sure what you could do by hacking a cow, but that's an interesting concept. Any other questions? I think we've hit most of them. Somebody's asking about pricing. On the cloud side, we don't have a lot of competitors in that space today. There are a few of our managed service provider communities that have developed their own cloud offering using our product today. So people like GTT or Megapath has a PCI compliance as a service offering. So it's kind of hard to compare and contrast. Our solution does both application performance monitoring as well as the security operations center type tools. And you can get slices and dices of different versions of that. The current cloud offering also has 3 flavors today. One is a do-it-yourself. We'll sell you the license, let you kind of do what you want. We have a mid-level service where we can do, we'll get you up and running, customize some alerts for you, and then kind of let you go from there all the way up to a fully outsourced security operations center through the cloud. The premises-based solution is priced based on a per device model currently. So a server, a router, a switch would be a device. So a license per, and then it's a monthly fee per device. That answer that question. I don't see any additional questions. I'll give you guys one more opportunity to throw back anything else I didn't cover or any other areas I might want to add additional color on.
Hey, Mike, can you tell the Spiceheads the best way to get in touch with you? Is it via your email, or can they reach out to you in the SpiceWorks community? How's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, SpiceWorks community is certainly a great way to do that. I've got my email address there. If you want to get a demo or a 30-day trial, which I highly recommend, we can get a little bit more granular and detail as to what our capabilities are around our solution. That's the info at AccelOps. Also highly recommend you follow our social feeds through Facebook, AccelOps, through Twitter at AccelOps, and then on LinkedIn as well. And
all right.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So it does look like we are out of questions, but that was a fantastic presentation. So thank you so much. Any final words?
No, I mean, just appreciate everybody taking the time today. I think Internet of Things is going to be one of those subjects that we're going to be talking about a lot more in future webinars as we see additional things coming onto the network and adding additional complexity to IT teams. And I just look forward to having more conversations about it.
All right, fantastic. I do want to remind everyone, if you still have questions, you can reach out to Mike. He is a green guy in the community. If you had to step out or miss any part of this presentation, you'll be getting an email in just a few days with a link to view the webinar on demand. Also, special thanks to AccelOps for creating today's content and sponsoring this great event. And thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in today. We hope to see you back soon for another SpiceWorks Partner Webinar. Until then, stay safe and keep it spicy.